Our lesson tonight is on the power of order, divine order, universal order. Edmund Sinnott wrote, "One suggestion is that there are two orders in the universe, the familiar one of time, the natural order, the one of our common life, and quite distinct from it, the eternal order, known to us only in mystical experience. For the mystic, these two orders intersect briefly, and in those moments, he lives in eternity. In those moments, he lives in the fourth dimension, that dimension of timelessness and spacelessness, the eternal now that exists within you at this moment. It is in that dimension that all things are known and that all power exists. That's the dimension of infinite possibility, yet unformed but very real. It's the kingdom of God, or the kingdom of the heavens that Jesus was talking about within you. Order is the first law of the universe, and if you look through the largest telescope or through the most powerful microscope into infinity in either direction, into the vastness of space or the smallness of things, you will always see a perfect order existing there. It's only at the point where you and I are looking into the universe that universal order seems to be disrupted. Order can be short-circuited by us, but it still exists. It is still there. It is always there. Order is. You can't create it. Order is not the experience of cleaning out your garage or your closet, although those are probably very nice things to do and can have an effect in the unfolding of order. But order stands out as an attribute of God, and there's no place that order doesn't exist. Now, if order is the first law of the whole universe, it must also be the first law of all of the parts of the universe, from the largest sun system or galaxy to the smallest atomic particle. And order is that first law. You and I are living parts of a living universe. And this is why that today's lesson on order is of prime importance to us, because we must somewhere along the way establish for ourselves or reestablish ourselves into that first and prime universal law. Divine order is a mind faculty that you can use, and in using it, although it is impersonal and universal, you can personalize it, bringing it down to achieve dramatic results in your own personal or private experience. You have order, and I have order, but we have not realized that we have order. And until it becomes real for us and we begin to exercise it, until that moment, we shall not experience order. But the moment that we do, we shall witness miracles of improvement in our mind, in our body, and in all of our affairs. But this dramatic demonstration cannot take place until we become aware that order exists and believe in it and begin to feel it out. And this faculty of the mind patiently awaits our exercise of it. And when you do, it will perform mighty works in your behalf. What is this power of order? How would you describe it? And what does it do? Well, one of the responsibilities of order is to procure. And procure means to obtain, to acquire, to bring about, to effect. And it comes from the Latin word meaning to take care of, to manage for someone else. Your divine faculty of order is your procurer. And it was designed to take care of you, to manage your affairs, to do things for you that you could not possibly achieve or do or acquire for yourself in some unaided way. Order is like a quartermaster. If you were in the armed forces, you know a quartermaster to be a military officer responsible for the acquisition of all the necessary items to run an army. Picture a large army. A great many things are necessary to feed that army, to supply it, to keep it moving, to keep it mobile, to keep it functioning in a satisfactory way. And so you have the quartermaster corps, whose primary function is that of supply, of acquisition. And order is therefore like a quartermaster. If it will supply you with all of the things necessary to run your life and to make the demonstrations that you need in your life. Or you can think of it as a naval petty officer responsible for the guidance or for the navigation of the ship. Order is that officer who is on the bridge responsible for bringing your ship into port. And if your ship hasn't come in, it's only because you have not yet established divine order in your life. And the moment that you do, it will head for a dock. And you'll be standing there the moment that it arrives. The word quarter means residence, and order is quartered in the very center of your being. It exists there. It is a faculty that is already in you, only needing to be awakened. Order is the faculty in the universe and in you that connects everything together just right. Order knows how to make right connections. You see, we have thought it necessary to rely on human connections. Well, with divine order, you don't need human connections, and yet in a very strange way, if divine order is established, you will have all of the connections at every level, including the human connections that you need. But you do not depend upon the human connections. Divine order is connecting you with the right persons at the right time and in the right ways in order to bring everything that you need into a fully functioning life. Order has to do with the proper arrangement of all things and the perfect relationship of one thing to another thing and a following of one thing after another in order of succession. Order controls the sequence of things or of events. In this fantastic universe in which we live, all of the parts are in perfect balance, perfect relationship with each other. And so it is with this incredible machine that you call your body. Think of the order that exists there at this very moment. If you will, imagine all of the capillaries, certainly millions, perhaps billions of small blood vessels that are opening and closing in a very divinely intelligent way to keep your temperature at exactly the right control and your pressure just exactly the way that it's supposed to be. And you don't even leak. Have you thought about that? You're 90-some% water and you don't leak. What do you think is keeping it all together? Order is in charge of planning, of arrangement. Order arranges everything. And when divine order is established in consciousness, it will go before you and make the crooked way straight. Have you heard that? If you don't have it, then the straight way somehow turns out to be crooked. Without divine order, we keep ending up at the wrong place at the wrong time. I know you've had that experience. But divine order will always have you at exactly the right place at exactly the right time. I wish I had an hour or more just to tell you of the marvelous examples of divine order working in the lives of people that I've known and in my own life. It happens all the time. All the time. I recall once, about 15 years ago, I was a speaker at a conference in Durham, North Carolina. And there were three men that I was speaking to in the hotel lobby from Cleveland, Ohio. Three very turned-on men that I had just met a few moments before. And we were talking about the spiritual life and the fact that once you become committed to the spiritual life, when your consciousness becomes the most important thing in your life, a new order is established. And in that new order, you will always be at exactly the right place at the right time. And I was trying to make a point, and at that moment, a friend of mine walked by, and his name was Bill. I said, Bill, tell us a story about divine order. And he told of a time, perhaps 2 years before, when he was on his way from Fort Lauderdale to Detroit, and I was on my way from Roanoke, Virginia to Dallas, and our paths could only possibly cross at a crossroads south of Birmingham, Alabama. Bill's life was very disordered. It had really come apart, unglued. He stopped at a restaurant about 100 yards beyond the highway that I was traveling through. Now, he did not know that I was coming from Roanoke, and I did not know that he was coming from Fort Lauderdale. Through a series of events that I do not have time to tell you, I should not have been there at that particular moment, and when I crossed that intersection, I should not have looked to my right and saw that restaurant, and I was not hungry, and besides, it was not the kind of place that I normally would eat. I continued on for a quarter of a mile, and something inside me forced me to turn around in heavy traffic and go back and make my way through that intersection and down that side road to walk in and have Bill say, Jack Boland. It was a divinely ordered moment that changed our lives. Bill has never been the same because of some things, some ideas that we shared at that moment. And so he spent another hour telling my three new friends in Durham. 2 months passed from following the experience in Durham. In those years, I was still in business and traveled, and one day I was in Jacksonville, Florida, and it was lunchtime, and I usually went back to my motel room and meditated on divine order or something. Except this day, I found myself doing a very strange thing. Walking around the city, and I went into a department store of all things. And I said to myself, Jack, what are you doing in this department store? And as I walked by the cafeteria, I saw a little sign that said pineapple cheesecake. And I thought, well, gosh, I must be here to have some pineapple cheesecake. And I did, and nothing happened, and I was leaving the restaurant and walking toward a distant exit, and I saw two men come in that exit and pause after they were in maybe 10 yards and looked around with the same expression that I had had on my face a few moments earlier, as if to say, what am I doing in this department store? And they turned to leave, and as they did, I approached them, and we looked at each other, and they were two of the people that I had left in Durham 2 months before. And I said to them, do you remember our last conversation about divine order? They said, yes, but let me tell you the rest of the story. The evening before they arrived in Jacksonville, the first time they had ever been there, it was a business trip for them. Their partner, back in Cleveland, had been trying to reach me to invite me to come to Cleveland to be a part of a conference, to speak. He did not know how to get in touch with me, and he called them in Jacksonville, knowing their itinerary, and they were trying to figure out how to get in touch with me because there was a deadline they had to meet. And they said, well, gosh, we just don't know. But one of them said the next morning at breakfast, wouldn't it be something if we ran into Jack in Jacksonville? Now, they didn't believe that they were going to. What are the odds? If we had been looking for each other, we could not have found each other. It's impossible under those circumstances. But we did find each other. That story goes on and on. If I told you the rest of it, you might not believe it. I'll stop where it's believable. Divine order really does work. You'll be at exactly the right place at the right time to meet the conditions and the persons that you need in your life, and you cannot miss them. Without divine order, you cannot find them. The order faculty is spiritual and therefore does its mighty work in the invisible realm of mind or of spirit, under spiritual law, so therefore we can't see it. And this mind activity works in a dimension in which there is no time or space. It's beyond visual sight. In fact, it's beyond the comprehension of the slow vibrations of all of the five senses and the really slow vibration of the intellect. You see, we think the intellect is some massive spiritual tool, and it is not. It is really of a very low order of knowledge. If you're depending upon your intellect, you are helpless, powerless, and you are really on your own. And for this reason, much of the order faculty, much of what it accomplishes, appears to us almost as magic. Remember that order works in a realm in which there is no time, and therefore it works as quick as a flash. Think of a flash bulb going off. You really can't see it, although you saw it. Well, order works quicker than a flash. You can't examine or analyze order in a normal way with the senses and with the intellect. Don't even try. You can't. If perfect order exists as a principle and is available to each person as an activity and as an experience, then it's perfectly natural to wonder why we live such disordered lives. And the answer is easy. It's simple. We don't know and we don't believe that we have a power faculty of order. But intuitively, desperately needing all the things that order was created to provide for us, we try other artificial ways that won't work, trying to provide the things that divine order will achieve for us. And the first step that we take is an intellectual approach. We try to think our way into the order that we need in life. We plan. We make great plans. We scheme a lot. We force by will. We cajole. Another word for that is con. Oh, you do. You're pretty good at it. All of us are. Watch yourself do it. We even lie a lot in order to get what the universe has so freely given to us. And when this doesn't work, we also begin to develop a negative emotional approach, and that's where disorder really begins. When the first system doesn't work, and then we begin to react with negative emotions, it is at that point that we fuss and fume and argue and attack. We begin to procrastinate, to put off. I'll try tomorrow. It really hasn't worked. It probably won't work, but it might if I try tomorrow, but why today? We labor over unimportant details, things that lead nowhere, and almost complete involvement with no things. We put second things first, and things begin to pile up in closets and garages, and we keep everything and throw nothing away because we might need it sometime. Inaction takes over. Inertia begins. And at that point, we begin to talk a lot. Bravely, but we do very little. We become very defensive of our position. And a lack of excellence is evident in every area of our lives. It's as though we are beginning to get a little worn or frayed around the edges, around the collar or the cuffs. Everything starts falling apart. Relationships, the house, the apartment, the car, bills pile up. Did you know that poverty is a gross example of disorder? And as everything comes unglued or falls away from us, it begins to be replaced by something worse than what we got rid of. In short, this person soon has his mind, his body, and his affairs in a series of wrong connections. We're making wrong connections. And this condition is called disorder, and it's basic to the human condition and to human thinking. Now, in truth, or in metaphysics, when this happens to a lot of us, the way that we rationalize it is to say, in the midst of this chaos, divine order exists. Have you heard someone say that? Their whole life is coming apart, and they say, well, divine order is here. Divine order, my foot, it is disorder. It is a series of wrong connections made in your mind, and you can pray till your hair grows right out that door, and nothing will happen until order is established in your mind. Disorder is unattractive under all circumstances. And the classic example of disorder is a junkyard. Think of a junkyard, a disordered arrangement of disordered equipment. Everything is there because it won't work. Now, have you ever seen a junkyard where everything was all lined up perfectly? You haven't. Well, disorder in one's life means that we have a junkyard mind. And there will be that disarray of conditions and circumstances and relationships in our lives. Our lack of right connections. I wish that the people in Albuquerque who are going to hear this, at that moment the lights went out. I'm telling the people who will hear this on tape. And that's what happens to us when disorder takes place. We just pull the plug on order and the lights go out. And we get short-circuited in all of the important areas of our lives. Now, our lack of right connections or disorder could be prevented, or it can be corrected. This is what a mistake is. It is a mistake. It is a take that missed. Now, wrong connections are not necessarily the result of evil doing, not in deliberate wrong doing or innate wickedness, and certainly not in what we call bad luck. There's no bad luck. Only disorder. To find the answer to our disordered lives, does this mean that we are going to have to ferret out every wrong and find the perfect solution ourselves? No. Can the blind lead the blind? We simply find a system that will work. We simply plug ourselves in, and the lights come back on. Order is established. And the system that will establish order for us is the one that was taught by Jesus the Christ. And this is the system or the way of discipleship or of discipline. That's what discipleship means. One who is willing to discipline the mind, the thoughts, and the emotions. The mystical powers of man are symbolically stated in Scripture as the 12 disciples of Jesus. And this whole story in the Bible illustrates the fact that the Christ of our spiritual nature is responsible for awakening and taking charge of these 12 faculties that each one of us have in our minds, of disciplining these faculties. You see, these powers were created by Spirit to serve you, your Christ self, this larger self of you. And when you learn the nature and function of these 12 faculties, you can call upon any one of them or upon all of them and direct them to perform their miracle-working power for your good and for service to God and to your fellow man. Some of you, I know, can remember Orphan Annie in the comics. Remember? Remember Daddy Warbucks, who was the original Kojak? Daddy Warbucks had a giant servant named Punjab. Remember Punjab? The giant who was dressed in ancient Eastern garb with the funny hat and the pantaloons. He must have been 10 feet tall. But Punjab would appear from nowhere. And he would always come in at exactly the right moment. His timing was always perfect to save little orphan Annie or Daddy Warbucks. He got them out of the darndest scrapes that I ever saw, things that no human power could have saved them from. And here came Punjab at just the right moment, performing the most amazing feats of service and guidance. And Punjab could make things or people appear or disappear in the twinkling of an eye. I always wanted a Punjab in my life. And then one day I found out I had one. Divine order. Order works in the same personal, magical way. And you have a Punjab too. Would you like to produce some magic in your life in a dramatic, personal way? Well, order is the mind power that's represented by James, the son of Alphaeus. The physical location is a ganglionic nerve center in the very middle of the body, just back of the navel. And the color associated to help remember and to use divine order, that color is green. It's the full, rich green in nature that is represented by the fullness of growth in the summertime. Picture for a moment, if you will, the leaves on all the trees and the grass in mid-June when we've had lots of rain. Now, think of the jolly green giant. Order is a giant faculty. It's all-powerful and all-intelligent. And order is a giant that was created to obtain or to acquire for you all that you need. And order is a giant that will materialize to produce your good. It will come out of the invisible world, just like Punjab did, and take care of you all of the days of your life. Order will fill your life with new growth, with lots of green things, including and especially money. That's why green is the color. Order is the officer in charge of guiding your destiny, the officer commissioned to bring your ship into port. And if it hasn't come in, think of divine order and become willing to have the experience of it. In Matthew, the 6th chapter, I read to you, Jesus speaking, "So my counsel is, don't worry about things, food, drink, and clothes, for you already have life in the body. Look at the birds. They don't worry about what they eat, and they don't need to sow or reap or store up food, for your heavenly Father feeds them, and you are far more valuable to him than they are. Will all your worries add a single moment to your life? And why worry about your clothes? Look at the finest lilies. They don't need to worry about theirs, and yet King Solomon in all his glory was not clothed as beautifully as they. And if God cares so wonderfully for flowers that are here today and gone tomorrow, won't he surely care for you? So don't worry at all about having enough food and clothing. Your heavenly Father already knows perfectly well that you need them, and he will give them to you if you give him first place in your life and live as he wants you to. So don't be anxious about tomorrow. God will take care of your tomorrow too. Live one day at a time." Now, his counsel or instruction is not about not having. So many people have read this and said, well, you're not supposed to have anything. You're not supposed to want anything. You're not supposed to enjoy anything. And that's not the message at all. If you will read it again, you will hear that the message is about not worrying. It's about not worrying. You see, worry is a wrong connection. It is a disorder. Why? Because order is a feeling power. Order is in the very center of your being, the focal point of your feeling nature. And order is activated or programmed or set into motion by feelings. Order responds more to feelings than to thoughts. All negative emotions lead to wrong order or to disorder. And disorder leads to disaster. Order is a very intelligent and a very responsive power. And order responds to your feelings. For example, the strongest feelings that you're having in a given moment. Order is observing, it's monitoring your feelings. And order will respond to your feelings. For example, if you're filled with fear, order must believe you, it must take you at your feelings. And it will say, gosh, she just loves to be afraid. Now, I will procure for her the kind of conditions and circumstances, the kinds of events that will help her to be afraid. I will fill her life with fearful things. The person who is anxious, the same experience. If you let negative emotions exist, if you're anxious or worried about things, anything with the order of your life, the master teacher is saying, don't do that. Do not worry, do not be afraid, because if you do, you're establishing wrong connections. And the order that I have already established, I have already provided you with everything. Did you hear that in the message? All that you need at every level of your life to function exists. And not only does it exist, but I have provided you with a power that will bring to yourself all of the things that you need, providing that you give up negative emotions. Order procures and produces the conditions that correspond to your primary feelings. Also, order is out of time, meaning that Jesus said, don't be anxious about tomorrow or worry about yesterday, because these two worries and anxieties about the past and the future disconnect you from divine order. It'll pull your plug just like a few moments ago, and the lights will go out. I promise you they will. And in that moment, divine order simply will not exist, because order can only be programmed in a now moment. If your thinking is in the future or in the past, or if you're caught up in worry or anxiety, you have lost your order. Now let's remember that we're dealing with a spiritual power. And so the way it works is spiritual. And the work it accomplishes is spiritual. Now in spirit, a right connection consists of a thought that puts first things first. In spirit, the only thing which ever comes first is God, or the principle of absolute good. And all else is second. Only God is first. So a thought of God, or a thought of your spiritual condition, above all other things, must be first. If at any moment, if some outer thing is first, if the problem is first, if the person is first, then disorder exists. You've made a wrong connection. Anytime that the emphasis is on the outer thing, then that's a wrong connection. Now, remember, the idea is that not that you're supposed to not have things, you're supposed to have everything. But first things first. Your consciousness is first. And any other approach is always a wrong connection. If you're worried or anxious or afraid about anything at this moment, you're making a wrong connection. And you're establishing and continuing disorder in your life. You see, if you're anxious or worried or afraid, you're not thinking about God, even if you're praying. Your concern is a negative response to some person or some place or thing, and divine order is therefore short-circuited. But a thought or a prayer that says God first, the right thing first, restore me to my right feeling first. That's the right order. Our first and most important connection must always be to attempt to reestablish our conscious contact with God. Go to God first. And the right connection is made. Rufus Jones wrote, I find the most convincing evidence of him not in wind or fire or earthquake, but in the quiet testimony of beauty, of truth, of love, of goodness, of peace, of joy, self-sacrifice, and consecration, which point to another kind of world within the one we see and touch. A world of spirit, of intelligence, of order, of organizing power, a realm which reveals ideals of goodness. And a quiet testimony must be reproduced in us. as we begin to demonstrate feelings of beauty, of truth, of love, of goodness, and of peace, and of joy. You see, we must become so disciplined that these are the emotions that we begin to demonstrate in spite of the conditions that might be there in a given moment. Vince Lombardi said, "The quality of a man's life is in direct proportion to his commitment to excellence, regardless of his chosen field of endeavor. And divine order also requires the commitment to excellence." To paraphrase Lombardi, the quality of order expressed in your life is in direct proportion to your commitment to excellence, regardless of your particular need. Order does not come from the needs that you have. Your needs are supplied according to your commitment to excellence. Order works in a field of perfection it's marvelous to perform. It works in a field of perfect energy, perfect intelligence, and perfect joy. And so order requires us to become willing to commit ourselves to a standard of excellence, to live our lives well and beautifully, because order can not do its work in any other field. Order cannot work in a junkyard or in a mind that is so disordered. And divine order cannot work from halfway measures and from vague commitments. Somewhere along the way, each one of us must become totally committed to the spiritual life, not the religious life. This does not necessarily mean joining a church, but it does mean that my state of mind is the most important thing in my life, the most precious thing in my life. I put it first. My conscious contact with God comes first. And in that moment, the most remarkable things begin to happen. Right connections are made, and a proper sequence begins to occur. Everything begins to unfold. And you begin to see in the visible world around you the result of the invisible but very tangible thing that took place in your mind. It can be a miraculous healing of the body, but it will certainly be something that will startle and produce a state of absolute ecstasy and joy in the eye and in the mind of the beholder. Now, we don't know enough about spiritual law to describe all of this process, but we can report some of it. When you begin to believe in divine order and feel and know and expect it to be active in your life, the intelligent power of your order faculty projects itself as a spiritual force into whatever needs its miracle-producing impact in your life. It knows exactly what to do. You don't have to tell it what to do. And wherever it goes, it immediately erases a wrong connection and establishes a right connection. And this is done as quick as a flash in the invisible realm of mind. And although order does its mighty work above and beyond our intellectual understanding, the result will be tangible. It will be visible, and you will know it. Order is defined as a condition in which everything is in its right place. But it always begins with the right action of your mind and expands to include all of your affairs. And so therefore, the right state of mind must be our first concern, the first order of our thought. And usually, if you've been in a difficult situation, the state of your mind has been your last concern, because you have believed that everything would be okay if your world would just shape up. If God would just fix it, would you not be all right? And so we have put second things first. And how can order exist? It can't. Now put some order into your thinking and into your emotions first. And watch how quickly your world will begin to take the shape that is the exact equivalent of the order that now exists in your mind. Well, order can produce the most marvelous, harmonious, and wondrous adjustments in human relationships. I've seen it happen. It can appear as a simple change of mind or the reversal of one's former position. It can reverse wrong or unfair conditions in your circumstances. It can change bad fortune to good fortune. 1,000 ways its wonders can and will occur. And all of them will be welcome. All of them will be beautiful. Most of them will be dramatic. They will leave you with an excitement for the dynamic that's taking place in your life. Another definition of order is absence of revolt, disturbance, turbulence, unruliness, and so forth. Think of order as the absence of revolt or disturbance or turbulence, unruliness inside your emotional life. And the moment that this peace begins to happen, order will begin to happen. To really understand order, one must think of its opposite, which is out of order. Out of order. Have you ever pushed the button of the elevator and found that it was out of order and you had to climb 8 flights of stairs? Order exists. It's always there. And if you and I are out of it, at any moment of our lives, we can get back into it. But this cannot be done externally. It is an internal thing, and it is a feeling thing. You can't think your way into it. You must feel your way into it. You must have the thought, the knowledge, the certainty that it does exist, but you begin to feel it. And you work with order in all of your affairs. Well, how about you in your life? Is there anything in your mind or body or in your outer world that smacks of disorder? Let's don't put it off. Let's go to work on it right now, right where you exist. Has life passed you by in any way? Divine order makes winners out of losers. Oh, I love that. Divine order will take a loser and make a winner of that loser. It knows how to do the things that ought to be done by me. It will do those things. So, if you've selected an area of your mind or your body or some important part of your world that needs order, let's go to work on it right now. Close your eyes for a moment and turn to the awareness of the power of God in you. And with the authority that has been given you to take charge of your mind, focus your attention in the very center of your being, below the solar plexus area, just back of the navel. And give order, James the Lesser, its assignment. Affirm, direct, decree, and know the divine order is working in me and through me in all situations that pertain to my life. And I will keep this belief active. I will continue to speak the word, and back of that word I will feel the beauty and the joy of order in action in my life. Order exists. I order divine order into its marvelous activity in my life. And I go out into my days and into my nights expecting marvelous things to happen. I will be at the right place at exactly the right time to experience the destiny that God has ordered for me. I feel it, I know it, I believe it.